Good morning, RadioNext.tv on the Cool Groove site. Dr. Mark Echo, Harold H.B. Bell in the studio right now, getting ready to warp and woof up your radio. Dr. Mark, what is happening, partner?
Oh, man, we got all kinds of good things going on in Indianapolis this week. Fantastic things, not the least of which is Art in the Park. Why don't you give them a little bit of a preview, HB?
Absolutely. Before we do that, let's just send our prayers out to those people down in Houston and Louisiana who are going through some extreme difficult natural disaster going on down there. We've never seen anything like this, and so we just want to make sure that the prayers are going out to those people. And speaking of those people, we've got people right here who are suffering as well. So this Saturday, September 2nd, we're going to be at Garfield Park, 12 p.m. to 6 o'clock p.m. with all different types of providers and resources in the world of mental health. Had a great conversation with you and some of the other doctors from the Indiana Association of Black Psychologists, the CTS Counseling Group. Richard Samuels, great conversation dealing in the world of mental health. So if you have family members and yourself, come on out this Saturday. Absolutely free. We're going to have free music. There will be food trucks so you can get your palate on and things for the kids to do. And also this great information that we can assemble together with all these different providers and resources. So that is this Saturday, September 2nd, Arts and Music in the Park. Please come out to Garfield Park, 12 to 6.
This is an important issue on Saturday, but we constantly are dealing with issues surrounding us in every venue. And in this particular discussion today, we're going to be talking about alternatives to health care, something that really was pounded during the election season, of course. Certainly over the last years of the Obama administration, certainly we saw an awful lot of discussion about these kinds of issues. So we're going to be talking about something brand new, at least in our venue, and that is healthcare alternatives. So if you've got somebody out there that's looking for healthcare, concerned about the insurance problem, doesn't have it, you need to tune into this. Tell somebody, as HB likes to say, to tell somebody to listen in this morning.
And you might need to come out to the mental health awareness and prevention after you hear about this healthcare, because that will drive you a little bit wacko. What we're going to do is take a short break, as we always do. We're going to introduce you to who Comenius Institute is, and we're going to get right into the conversation. Alternative healthcare. Dr. Brian Barber will be in on the second hour, and he's an expert in this field, so we can ready to learn something today. Warp and Woof Radio on the Cool Groove site at RadioNext.tv. RadioNext.tv on the Cool Groove site. Warp and Woof Radio, a show sponsored by Comenius Institute each and every Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Dr. Mark, let's give him a little info on Comenius.
Yeah, Comenius Institute. We're one of 35 study centers around the United States, located here in Indianapolis, and we work specifically on the campus of IUPUI. And we meet with students weekly to discuss concepts and ideas and disciplines, subject area ideas that come up in their studies. And this is a very valuable thing for them. They really find, actually every single week somebody says to me, I hadn't thought about it that way. When we think Christianly about things, we think differently than the rest of the culture does. So it's been very positive for them, having discussions with faculty, all kinds of good things, including this radio show, which is part of what we do at Comenius. I think it's a very powerful and important idea that needs to get out. And for those of you looking for a place to contribute, you might consider what it is to give money to RadioNext.tv, so that we might continue this great ministry.
Interesting, and we don't want to keep going back to the show that we did on psychology and the mind, but just like you were saying, when our young people leave and go away to school, sometimes talking is the best therapy.
That's right.
And they have a place to go, and you being the soundboard there gives them some ideas to have that premise to say, hey, I never thought about that before.
That's right.
I think as the adults and people who convey wisdom, that should always be what we're doing, is how can we dig deeper into critical thought process to give somebody a little bit of extra thought, or a little bit of seed to plant an extra idea that might not have been there, just on what they know.
Communication is huge, certainly in relationships. obviously, between individuals and people, but also the collaborative element of, hey, you know what, I never thought about it that way before, or I have new information now I didn't have before, which now allows me to have a better way to approach a certain subject or discipline. This is a big deal, HB.
Absolutely, and that's why, Scripture says more than, two people get together, then, great minds, then we have church.
That's right.
And church basically means let's communicate about what together we can do as a whole.
Exactly.
And speaking of that, man, you hit it right on the head when we started this program about the health care, Obamacare, whatever we want to call it. And the election was pretty much decided on just that message alone, because it has a lot of people. I have my take on it, and we can talk about that as the conversation develops. But when we're talking about healthcare and alternative healthcare, we're going to have some very specific information from Dr. Brian Barber in the second hour. But we always start in Proverbs and where things stand when it comes to Scripture. So if we're discussing healthcare alternatives today, give us a brief overview. And then what I want to know on the second part of that question is, why is healthcare such an important topic for Christians? So
sure.
We can take those double-edged
right absolutely. Now. So let me start with something real simple. Get some sleep. For those of you out here listening and you're really tired this morning, ask yourself the question, what did you do last night before you went to bed? And what time did you go to bed? What did you eat before you went to bed? What were you doing before you went to bed? I think about these kinds of things. For instance, my wife, Robin, gives me a hard time sometimes because I'm reading screens before I go to sleep. Obviously, that's not a good idea. So the idea of reading your cell phone for half an hour before you go to sleep does not do wonders for your sleep patterns. But here's another idea. This concept actually is popping up in a lot of different areas, and namely in the healthcare fields. And one of the articles I ran across this week, HB, had to do with the future of Christian healthcare ministries after Obamacare. Now, this was written back in February when everybody thought that everything was going to be replaced. Obviously, the Republicans couldn't get their act together. The Democrats, they haven't had their act together. So everybody's in a mess here. But bottom line is Christian ministries are now not only popping up around, but have been doing some really good work for some time. So I'm going to mention a few. Some of these healthcare sharing plans are based on the Acts 2 passage that the church had everything in common. And this is a really important and powerful concept. So one of the medical cost ideas that you might want to go to is a site called You Caring. That's YOU Caring. Check that out and see what kind of alternative ideas they might have to the insurance industry at that particular place. Then you've got Samaritan Cares Ministries, which is a really important idea as well, one where groups of Christians get together, band together, and do work for health care and share costs together as a group plan. So that's Samaritan Ministries. Now, those are just a couple of alternative ideas to what normally goes on. But what I want to suggest here, since you asked the second question too, is why is healthcare such an important topic for Christians? Let me go all the way back, HB, to church history. Because one of the things that we know about church history is that people have been dealing with not just the medical field, but general health for a very long time. So I want to suggest one particular website to everybody, and check this out. This is called ChristianHistoryInstitute.org. That's ChristianHistoryInstitute.org. Go there, type in the search line the word medical, and see what pops up. There are all kinds of connections in church history to the medical field. I just want to mention a couple of them. Actually, in issue 101 of Christian Institute, or Christian History as it's called, there's a special issue dedicated to health care and hospitals in the mission of the church. Just let me pause here to kind of stick this in here in between comments about medical alternatives. HB, you do not see any hospitals named after atheists. They are all named after St. Luke, St. Matthew, All Saints, all that kind of stuff. When we see these kinds of ideas, we have to ask ourselves the question, gee, I wonder who it is that's most interested in taking care of people. Oh, well, How about that? The Christian church might be interested. So, coming back to ChristianHistoryInstitute.org, Issue 101, Healthcare and Hospitals and the Mission of the Church. I highly recommend that people go out and grab this up. Check it out. You can actually buy the hard copy of this, or you can go online and see the digital copy of it. Very, very powerful stuff. You can find here the pioneers to medical missions, such as Dan Beach Bradley. You can find out the Medical Missionary Digest and Journal of some of these folks. There are timelines there that give healthcare and hospitals and the mission of the church. You see people that are going to the continent of Africa, for instance, for medical missions over years and years and years. There are all kinds of things here, and I highly recommend this magazine, mostly because I am an original subscriber to Christian History magazine. I love it. I think it's one of the great things that the Christian church has ever done, is actually go back in history and identify who's done what in history, HB. It's fantastic stuff.
Absolutely. And, it's ironic, and that's the reason I said, after kind of looking over what we were going to discuss today, it's ironic that when we bring our Christian platform, that we still are divided by the political platforms.
Yeah.
That it's supposed to be about caring and helping
people.
How
about that, huh?
That is it's one of the biggest I am so lost when we come to talk about, when we want to, get on our real big old stand and say this is who we are. I'm a Christian before I am anything.
There you go. That's it.
Just in my personal walk.
Right.
I am foul. I still have a stench of, sin. I got all of that. But in caring about people, I think Christians should be first, and then the label or the door that we want to go in on our personal belief we go into. Mm-hmm. So we got to do something about that.
Yes, we do.
As a group of band of Christians. Let's try to do that. Last question in this first segment. What principles from Proverbs, Mark, can be applied to the topic of healthcare?
Yeah, this is
we're talking about today.
This is a fantastic idea here. And once again, the reason, HB, as you always say, we go back to Proverbs is that these are universal transcendent principles. You don't have to be a Christian to follow these principles and actually get something out of it. How about that? These things can actually be applied, generally speaking, to all people. Now, I'm just going to give you a few, but quite frankly, they just range all the way through this book of Proverbs. But let's start real simple and start out in chapter 3 of Proverbs. Because what do we find right away in chapter 3 of Proverbs? In verse 1, "My son, don't forget my teaching. Let your heart keep my commandments, for the length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you." Wow, we get length of days and years of life added because we actually believe and practice and live this kind of thinking. Verse 8 goes on to say, "It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones." That word refreshment in English is literally the word medicine in Hebrew. It will be healing to your flesh and medicine to your bones. So when you follow God's dictates, when you follow His prescriptions, when you follow the principles given to us in the book of Proverbs, what do we find over and over and over again? We find that these kinds of things are beneficial to people. Here's another verse, Proverbs 4:22. "For these things that God has given to us, these principles to abide by, they are life to those who find them and healing to their body." Wow, healing to their body. If we would actually abide by the principles of Proverbs, we find these kinds of statements over and over again. 8:35 says the same thing. 21:21 says the same thing. Proverbs focuses attention on the inside of a person. Now, there are places in chapters 24 to 25, for instance, that speak of alcohol, for instance, as being an anesthetic. Actually, alcohol was used as an anesthetic because it dulls the senses. But then in chapter 25, it talks about the evil of overdoing or overindulging in alcohol. So these kinds of principles, HB, are all the way through Proverbs, and we find them over and over and over again if only we would apply them.
I know that's right. I wish they'd have gave me a prescription so, what's the line of going across.
There you go.
of doing yourself some good
That's
versus,
it.
messing around and making it bad for you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to continue this great discussion talking about alternative health. But first, we're talking about how health and the healthiness of applies to the book of Proverbs. This is Warp and Woof Radio on the Cool Groove site. RadioNext.tv, Warp and Woof Radio on the Cool Groove site, and Dr. Mark Echo, Harold H.B. Bell. Man, his first segment was kind of hot, Dr. Mark. I mean, we got all in, and we are talking about Healthcare Alternatives today on Warp and Woof Radio, and this is a big subject matter. And we were just talking off air about some of the catastrophic things going on in Houston. And it doesn't pertain to healthcare, but it pertains to covering all your bases, people. I mean, the glaring statistic when I heard on the news last night, Mark, about all the people in Houston who had homeowners insurance, only 15% of those people had flood insurance.
That's unreal.
And what they're going through now is flat out flood, and the insurance companies, based on my history, are not going to be kind.
No, they're not.
That is not their job. That is not what they do. So we have a lot of people who are getting ready to who are just at the tip of the drama that's getting ready to go down.
Exactly right.
So, like I say, let's keep these people in our prayers. They did not ask for this, and God only knows what God is doing in this situation. So all we can do is pray and ask for some relief and some stress relief for the people down in Houston and Louisiana. We like to talk about current events every time when we talk about any subject matter.
Yeah, that's right.
Is healthcare a justice issue or a universal right that everyone should expect?
Yeah, this is a really
tough one.
It is, because I've heard people talk this way. They've talked about healthcare being a justice issue or a right. So I wanted to at least mention some things about that this morning. I remember when President Obama made a comment toward the end of his presidency, which seemed to be quite uncaring. He said that maybe workers should no longer consider healthcare coverage as a right. So this was something that our president said, and this from a person who he and his family will receive the best health care coverage possible for their entire lives. Now let's flip that script around and say Congress passes health care laws all the time, but do not have to live with the laws that they create. Let me just say that again. Congress passes health care laws, but do not have to live with the laws they create, because they get health care coverage for life.
Would that be #hypocrite?
Oh, my word. We're talking both ways, man. I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, Independent. I don't care who you are. When we talk about politics, the issue is everybody getting the same thing? You want to talk about equality? Let's talk about equality in health care. So Americans have come to believe that health care has been part of their compensation. I think this took place especially after World War II. But in the Western world, we can have this discussion, HB. In other places in the world, folks don't even think about stuff like this because they don't even have health care. We're talking about this in America.
Oh, well, let's dive into that, because I know in the modernized countries, we're the only country who doesn't have a unified healthcare system.
Exactly, yes.
And so when we're talking third world countries who don't have healthcare now, that kind of puts America on that level when we talk about taking care of our whole population. So, we could tip this, the seesaw, as we like to call it, the teeter-totter, a whole lot of different ways. And it is scary to me to think that as a modernized country that we don't have something better than we have right now for the whole of a people, because we have such a dynamic landscape of financial wealth versus poverty that it reaches down to third world level.
That's exactly right.
Extreme. So, there has to be something that we can do for the population as a whole. And I don't know what that argument is. I don't know what the remedy is, but I know that the fact is something needs to be done.
Going back to the first segment, I think it all begins with us, because quite frankly, government never takes care of the people as it ought to, and of course, government should then be focused on us. So we really bear the burden of this, because nobody's going to help us, HB, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and then that's interesting, because our next question is, how does healthcare promote a better culture?
How about that?
Let's go, Dr. Mark.
How about that, partner? It's really fascinating to me that this morning, for instance, and I get these every day sent to me from Harvard Business Review. So here we are in Harvard Business Review. I want to just mention two articles that are the lead articles of the email that I received this morning. Here's article number 1. Stress leads to bad decisions. Here's how to avoid them. Now, these kinds of emails are going out to business leaders everywhere around the country, around the world, and they're saying, hey, stress leads to bad decisions. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out, of course, but the bottom line is, guess what? Employers are talking about this, and if employers who pay people to do their jobs are talking about this, gee, it must be something that is important to the rest of us. And here's something else. In that same email this morning, I received this particular article. Can 10 minutes of meditation make you more creative? Can 10 minutes of meditation make you more creative? Now, I know that the word mindfulness is all the rage these days. Over the last year, 18 months, mindfulness has made its way into the dictionary, and we're all talking about mindfulness now. But bottom line is, Scripture is very clear about meditation and the importance of taking stress away, and that is, once again, going back to our first segment, we talked about Proverbs. Proverbs is concerned about the medicinal nature of Scripture as medicine for the soul. So when we talk about this, I have to go back to maybe a session or two that we've had on air in the last few months. We've had a chaplain come in here. We've had a psych person come in here. And basically what they're saying is that chaplains and psychologists and counselors are actually beneficial to the workplace. Now, there's a program on Showtime, I think it is, called Billions. And on this particular program, they actually have one of the characters in the cast is a psychologist who is invested in the lives of the people. So the people who are selling bonds and trading stocks and all this kind of stuff actually have a psychologist to go to in their workplace, which is really fascinating. So here's my question. How do workers function when their own well-being is taken care of, their mental, intellectual selves are whole? HB, I got to go back to a book that I tell everybody about. It is a fantastic, phenomenal book. We have to go back to a book entitled The Search for God and Guinness. The Search for God and Guinness. Here is a Christian man who in the late 18th century, the late 1700s, created something called Guinness beer. I want you to go right now, find the YouTube video, The Search for God and Guinness, see the 5-minute overview of this particular book. I remember when I read this book, I got through the introduction and I wept. And this was back in 2010 when we were just coming out of the awfulness of the recession that we were in. Bottom line to this, here it is, that business people, here's a man, Mr. Guinness, who took care of his people. He gave them free dentistry, free physician care. They had masseuse available to anybody. He gave them vacation, paid vacation for free. If somebody died, they took care of your family for life. So when we talk about the concept of health care, I think ultimately this rests on businesses and business people, and we have to consider ourselves, how do we take care of the people that are in our employ? There you go, HB.
Wow. You said a mouthful, and my wandering mind, man. And I think I just want, before we go to the last question in the second segment here, is to ask, when you mention what Guinness did for his people, why do we find it so difficult that the stakeholders and the people who should be responsible, I know the answer, and Mark, quite frankly, the big elephant in the room is the money that is made by the insurance companies here in America.
Sure.
And in this conversation, we never go that direction, almost like the NRA. We never go to talk about those big monsters that help pay for what it is that I guess the elected officials are running for. We don't go near that, but if we did, we would open up a can of worms.
Oh, my word.
Bigger than the planet, basically. Yeah. And, what Guinness did is the way it should be.
Absolutely. People taking care of people, HB, and the folks that are making the money, they bear responsibility, especially if you're a Christian and you're a business person and you're making money. You should take care of the people that are in your employ. But beyond that, I think about the moms and dads and folks that are out there, the parents. How do we take care of our little ones at home? Do we think about ourselves, the new boat, the new car, the vacation, or are we going to take care of the little ones in our home? Man, this is an ongoing conversation.
Well, last question in this segment is going to be, giving examples of Christians who make a positive impact in the health field. I mean, Guinness was one, and we've got a guy who made beer
that's right.
popular that can understand this, and we got churches and organizations that are supposed to be built around people that can't get this. It's amazing for me, man. Don't get me on my soapbox.
All right. Well, I'll get on mine then. Let me give just some different ideas about this, because I'm an idea guy. I'm a communications and an idea guy, and so my responsibility is to give people ideas about, hey, maybe we can think about this in different ways. So when I think about this, I'm thinking about those who might be gifted in math and science. Maybe you should consider becoming a doctor. I'm thinking about younger people, perhaps, but maybe you've got this thing that's the Spirit's been prompting you about. Hey, maybe going into the medical field is for you. Perhaps you're a teacher. Maybe some folks who are teachers are going to listen to this podcast after the fact. Bring medical personnel to your class. Introduce children to doctors and nurses and folks who take care of others so that we can have a more caring concept about what we're teaching our young people. One of my friends at church teaches at IU Medical, training the next generation of doctors. What he does is really powerful and important. Perhaps you're a writer. We need people who can help folks bridge knowledge from the medical community specifically into the common language of the common person. This is a big deal for all of us.
That's my movement.
That's exactly it. You're the wordsmith, man. Inventors, researchers, we need you. We need people who are on the front lines of looking into microscopes all day long. This is huge. Read about Washington Carver and the peanut, for instance, if you want to go back in history and think about, here's a man who discovered 250 usages for the peanut. Maybe there are new discoveries to be made and new ownership concepts to be created so that people can have benefits of medical care. And of course, we cannot leave this discussion without saying something about our good friends down at Neighborhood Fellowship and the wonderful free health care that they give through IU Health and other institutions down there every Saturday. Go check them out. Hit up Jim Streetemeyer, who's a friend of us, been on the program a number of times. Jim, if you're listening, congratulations and thank you so much for the good work that you do on 10th Street Neighborhood Fellowship.
Absolutely, and we're going to take another break before Dr. Brian Barber comes in and tells us about health alternative care, and we're going to find out more on how we can get the most out of our dollar. And this is painful. You know, it's a great conversation, but it's painful because when you open up conversation and you really can't get an answer or a clear-cut answer, man, that's tough. But we are going to get to it and get through it. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio on the Cool Groove site. RadioNext.tv, Warp and Woofing on the radio here on the Cool Groove site. Dr. Mark Eckel, Harold H.B. Bell, getting it in today. Every Wednesday, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, trying to make a little sense of all of this. And a great topic today, boss.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us something about something we were just talking about off air about the number of people. Fill in the blanks on this.
Well, we're talking healthcare alternative, and we're already talking about insurance and healthcare insurance, how it fits the individual. But as I was telling you, working with senior citizens, you started to get some stats and started to do some research and found out that there are people over 65, 10,000 people a day turning 65.
That is unbelievable.
There's never been a demographic or a age of people who have had this amount of people. This is going to be. It's a beautiful thing because life now is longer, and we get I say get a chance to extend your your membership into the pearly gates, but. Here on Earth, we're going to have some issues, and we were talking about some of the issues that we might face. We're going to have people 72 years old taking care of people who are upwards of 95 and 100. And usually when you become 70 and 75 years old, you're needing the help.
Yeah.
So now you're going to be more or less the caretaker of your parents. And,
That's right.
We have never seen anything like this before. So we need to get this together
That's
sooner
right,
than later because the problems that we're going to face in the next 10 to 15 years are going to be catastrophic if we just don't figure out some type of way to take care of our people, much like Mr. Guinness did.
Yeah,
that's my new hero and my favorite beer, by the way. But anyway, as we start this third segment, before Dr. Brian Barber comes in, and he's going to tell you about healthcare alternatives on Dr. Mark and his conversation. Who are some Christians in Indianapolis who are doing good through healthcare, man?
There are all kinds of folks out there that I know, and I'm sure that I know just a thumbnail of everybody that's out there. I'll just mention a few. I think about Lizzie Fisher, for instance. She's a Comenius student. Right now, she is just engaging in her junior year at IUPUI, and she is into cytotechnology. Now, this is just a fascinating discussion because what we find in cytotechnology is she's spending a lot of time in a microscope figuring out how cell structures are good or bad. And so this is really an important area, and we have one of our students actually in this. My dentist, Dr. Sarah Gove, has great ministry through dentistry, does great work. We just love her, think the world of her, doing really good work here in Fishers. Dean Wiggers, for instance, is a chiropractor, does fine work up on the northeast side, and really improves the beneficence to other people's physical well-being. I know a number of nurses, Stephanie Payton, Lynn Winslow, Beth Pope, all these folks, good folks doing good work as Christians in the nursing profession. Scott Cooper, IU Medical, helps in the research field, spending time with blood samples, peering through microscopes all day long. There are folks out there in a place called Christian Healthcare Ministries. There are all kinds of options for folks that are out there, and this list could go on and on and on, I suspect. But one of the big issues that we're going to face here today and talk about later on today, when Dr. Barber comes in and joins us in the second hour, is this whole area of direct primary care. And this has been blowing up in the last couple of years. I was on Twitter today, found all kinds of articles from the Boston Globe about this. There's Beacon Primary Care up in Fishers, an LLC that does really good work up there. Same kind of thing, direct primary care. Really good stuff going on, HB.
Well, this next question is the one that's going to get you all tangled up in this barbed wire. No, because we kind of touched on this earlier. Brian Barber's in the house. How you doing, Doctor? We're just having a good conversation here as we await your presence. But this is a good question because we were talking about this earlier, what society as a whole versus we as Christians face when we start talking about healthcare. So is there a difference between how popular culture and the Christian culture practice healthcare, and if so, explain for me.
Yeah, I think this is a big deal. I could go on and on about this for hours, but if you begin with a naturalistic or a materialistic mindset, that is, you only believe in the physicality of the human person, then you only see that which you can see or smell or touch or taste or hear. But there's much more to the person than the five senses. When we talk about this from a Christian vantage point, we're talking about the holistic care, which means taking into account the whole person, including the world, which is unseen. So, for instance, a doctor friend who was taking care of a friend of mine, Terry McIntosh. Terry McIntosh had an abdominal aneurysm from which he should have died. Thankfully, he was rehabilitated. All kinds of benefits to him were given, and this happened in November of this past year. And then he's rehabbing from this right now. A fantastic story. But what happened was that the doctor who immediately saw him after this happened to him was just amazed. And he said, and this is from a non-believer, he said, prayers kept Terry alive. Now, when you stop to think about this, I got to talk about some other things. I got to talk about Atul Gawande, for instance, who wrote a book called Complications, A Surgeon's Note on Imperfect Science. This is not a book that you want to read before you go into surgery, because basically what the surgeon says is, you know what? Sometimes we guess, and that's why I said you don't want to read this before you go into surgery. But it's a really fine book. I love Atul Gawande. I love how he writes. Fantastic doctor and surgeon. But along with that, you cannot miss Dr. Henry Brandt and all of his good books. I'm holding in my hand his book, In His Image. If you've never read Brandt and Yancey's books, Fearfully and Wonderfully Made, In His Image, these are fantastic books that get after the baseline bottom issues, and that is, from a Christian vantage point, there's much more to us than our physicality, HB.
Well, before we get with Dr. Brian Barber and take this last question, I do have something to ask, Mark. Do you think that if we will remove our political tabs on how we think that we could get health care fixed and solved, do you think we'd be closer?
I do.
If it wasn't this aisle thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Forget about crossing the line or crossing over to the other side. Can we just be human for a moment? Could we just maybe talk about being human beings? That would be a really nice thing. And, by the way, I want to go back and say what I said before. If Congress and the presidents had to endure the same kind of health care that we do,
it would be fixed
quick. Oh, my word, would it be fixed quickly. Let's talk about that some
lifelong thing will make you a little bit biased and hold firm on your political,
That's right.
stance. But the last thing that we're going to talk about before we introduce Dr. Brian Barber is one of the most spectacular women in the world.
That's right.
Spent 60 years, taking care of people, and you cannot have a political badge on you when you're talking about taking care of people. And
That's
this
right.
is your beautiful mother, Miss Virginia Eckel. Tell us about some of the stories in healthcare that people might want to know about.
Man, I tell you, HB, Mom can tell stories all the way back to the 1950s when she started. And, for most folks, when we talk about the 1950s, we're talking about ancient history. But let me just give you some snapshots along the way of things she's told me about. She did her internship in Gowanda, New York, where she dealt with something called the snake pit. In fact, there is actually a movie out there called The Snake Pit. This is how we used to deal with people who had psychological problems. We'd put them in these awful places and then leave them be, and it was an awful, awful thing in medical history. She talked about the hazing and the initiation rites that she had to go through, one of which was going to find a brown stool. This is just for the medical people out there, you're probably chuckling already. But these are the kinds of things, she would say, tell me some of these kinds of stories. Here was a woman who worked second and third shift work. So, she was a mom that was out there working just like other moms do in that day and in this day both. Then she went into vocational education instruction. She was teaching LPNs and RNs in vocational ed programs. She was teaching not just kids that were in high school, but we're talking about teaching adults as well. She actually asked me to speak at a nurse's graduation once, which was really kind of fun. I told the people then I grew up with bedpans and catheters, so I knew all about that kind of stuff. Later, Mom shifted to wellness care and health screenings. And that's how actually she ended her shot at being a nurse for over 60 years. I remember personally her giving me my shots for the awful allergies I had as a kid. She gave me a good view of nursing, so much so that I'm still working on a program that we want to have at Warp and Woof dedicated to nurses. I'm trying to get a whole bunch of nurses in here. That would be a spectacular program. HB, she's your mom too, don't forget. This is good stuff, man.
Breaking the metaphysical down to the mellow, as they like to say. We're going to come back and introduce you to Dr. Brian Barber, and we're going to find out about alternative health care in the 21st century and what we can do to put some stop gaps in between all this tragedy that we've been, because really this is tragic when we look at it, when we're talking about America and we can't figure out a way to have all of our people taken care of. Some way, somehow, some shape, some form, some fashion, we will. We're going to come right back. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio. Dr. Mark Eckel, Harold H.B. Bell, in studio. Special guest, Dr. Brian Barber. Stay tuned.
All right, we are back. RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. This is Warp and Woof Radio. You hear us every Wednesday from 10 until noon. And we are glad to be with you here today talking about issues concerning healthcare and alternatives to healthcare. And we have in studio with us here today Dr. Brian Barber. Dr. Barber, we're really glad that you're here with us today. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, your military service, education, and how your Christian beliefs have formed your views of healthcare.
Well, that's kind of a loaded question. So I'm originally from northern Indiana, and we moved down to Indianapolis about 7 years ago with my wife, and we have 4 children. And I have a direct primary care practice that is faith-based. And basically what direct primary care is, it's kind of a new model in healthcare, particularly in the Indianapolis area. There are some guys that have been doing it a while. It's actually been around since the 1990s, 91, somewhere in there. It's been around, a pretty good amount of time, about 7%. 5 to 7% of physicians across the board in the United States do this model. And what we are doing is we are basically circumventing insurance and telling patients that instead of paying your premiums, which we do tell people they probably need some sort of catastrophic coverage because they can't use this for a hospital system or any really expensive testing. But for primary care, just going and seeing your regular doctor for bread and butter things like high blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, etc. It makes more sense to be able to pay someone, say, $75, $50 a month for unlimited visits. You can come in as much as you want, as many times as you want, and we even include, in our case, routine labs with it: cholesterol, CBCs, thyroid checks, those kind of things that you would normally check. We just put that in as our payment plan and cover it for the patient, and then they come in and see us as many times as they need to see us for, and we don't worry about billing insurance. And that typically does two things. Number one, it gives the patient assurance of mind that they don't have to worry about being seen in a 10 to 15 minute visit and being rushed out the door. Typically, our new patients are an hour, and our follow-up patients are about a half an hour. And the reason for that is, of course, you get to know someone, and getting to know someone is the primary reason for our practice, because we are ministry-minded, meaning that we try to take care of the whole person, body, soul, and spirit. And research shows that most people either prefer or feel better when they have a particular faith that they use to hold on to, or that they depend on for guidance and for comfort. And people of faith, you can look at any research study you want, but typically they tend to do better with outcomes than people who don't. And that's been in the literature now for several years. And so we try to minister both to the body and spirit. And we do it in a convenient format where the patients can spend the time that they need to discuss all of their problems with the doctor, and do it in a way that is cost effective both for us and for them. For me to take insurance would probably be about 40 cents on the dollar that I would spend with a professional billing company or a biller and a coder and the processing fees that go with insurance. Not to mention you have to be credentialed with an insurance company. In other words, you have to get on their panel and apply, which can take up to 6 months before you see any income. And so those are things that, when taken into account, a much more cost-effective way is just to tell the patient, I'm not going to work for the insurance company, I'm going to work for you. And so you pay me a monthly amount just like a health club, and we'll see you whenever you need, as much as you need. And so we started that practice back in February. And it's been kind of slow growing because this is this is a new model. And people aren't used to this model because they just want to flip out their insurance card and say, what's my deductible?
Right.
Well, you don't have one.
Right.
As a matter of fact, we don't care what network you're in, because you can be in our network for, $75 a month or whatever it is. So, that's what we're doing right now.
This is an important idea, certainly one that needs to get more script out there. I mentioned before you got on air that this kind of thing was blowing up in the last couple of years. I went on Twitter, I went on Facebook, I went on Bing, the search engine, just to see who has been talking about this. And for the most part, the majority of what I was reading about was taking place in 2016 and 2017. So the kinds of ideas that are out there, this is becoming much more of a flourishing idea. Now, as I remember in our conversation, you told me at that time that there were other people in the area that were doing this kind of thing, DPC care or DPC. Tell us a little bit about those folks as well.
Yeah, that's right. I am in a network called Freedom HealthWorks, and we are a group of like-minded independent physician practices. We don't have a umbrella organization that dictates what we do. We all are independent, but we're independent together. That's the funny thing about physicians. Physicians all want to be independent, but they want to be independent together. They want to have that camaraderie and that group type feel to them, if for anything, to have collective bargaining with things like insurance companies and lab vendors, etc. So there's about 8 to 10 of us. I think 8 practices right now. There's several on the north side. Westfield Family Medicine is the prominent one, and they've been around for a while. And then we have the Naptown Primary Care, Dr. Momenta, which is in Noblesville. We have Dr. Patel, which is you had mentioned him, in Fishers. We have a doctor down in Greenwood, Dr. Hector, who I go see actually, and he's direct primary care as well. He's been doing this for a number of years. And so there are that are popping up around the Indianapolis greater area, probably about 10 to 13 practices right now. And we're all trying to, break ground for a new healthcare model that definitely is cost effective. It's just trying to get the insurance companies to come on board. Right now as we speak, you don't know this because I just did it recently. I signed with a company out of Washington that specializes in working with insurance brokers. And what they're doing is they're trying to build a wraparound catastrophic plan and combine it with the fees that go with the direct primary care plan and offer that in one package to employers.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So that's what they're doing right now. And as a matter of fact, there are 3 brokers, I believe, in the Indianapolis area that have asked for this service. And so we've got some on board. Now we just have to get the employers on board. And as an employer, if you look at the cost savings in using a direct care model for your primary care and only keeping a catastrophic coverage, especially if you're self-insured. I mean, you think about it. If you're paying the bills for everybody, it only makes sense to have one central location that they can go to receive their primary care and have wellness screens to try to identify problems before they become big so that you can help save. And it is very effective. It's saved millions of dollars for companies so far, and in this model, because there are several others doing it. And it's just it's worth doing. It's just slow going and trying to get the patient volumes up.
This is fantastic news, I think, for everybody. And I think earlier in the broadcast, in the first hour, HB and I were talking a little bit about politics, and I certainly overstated the case, hearing something from you earlier about the issue of congressmen. Not all of them go into this, into the specialized wonder of their own health care and so on that they get for life. Some have actually opted out of that. Could you just tell us a bit about some of those congressmen who might have done that and gone a different direction?
Oh yeah, I have a personal friend of mine who just left office recently. He was a U.S. congressman from northern Indiana, and he decided that he was going to go on a med share program called Good Samaritan's Health Share. And the reason was because he had seen from being on the exchange, which he had did, that the premiums were starting to skyrocket. I mean, things were so expensive that, contrary to what the general public knows and believes, congressmen, they don't get their president's salary for life when they get out of office. They don't get health care when they get out of office. These are things that I used to think until I actually spent some time with him, knowing that some of the guys that have been in Congress for 50 and 60 years, they have these carve-out golden parachutes, so to speak, that they have been able to draw from. But the newer guys especially, that's not the case. They don't have these golden, plans out there that they've just carved out for themselves that they are, just fleecing the general public off of. They actually choose to go into the same type of system that the rest of us do. And you know what? My hat's off to them.
Yeah, I appreciate knowing that. Honestly, it's something that when you start hearing new information, getting new knowledge, it certainly helps. One of the things that we had talked about when you and I sat and chatted about this a few weeks back was about your military service, and in particular now, not just tell us about your military service and where you served, but also about why it is that your military service is being attractive to others in medical care in your arena.
Sure. I served in the Navy from 86 to 92, and then after Desert Storm, I went to college. I spent a little time in the reserve as a hospital corpsman, And I realized very quickly the Navy stands for never again volunteer yourself, And so what I ended up doing then was commissioning in the Air Force as a position. And, we all know Air Force is a gentleman's service. That's where we have our golf courses and our air-conditioned barracks. And ask any Army guy, he'll tell you that. So I was served in the Air Force for almost 10 years. And what I found out was, number one, it is getting better, but the VA is just overwhelmed with the amount of care that needs to be delivered and what they can do. Their infrastructure isn't big enough. It can't handle the load. And there are several gaps in care that our veterans are suffering from because of hours and hours and months even of wait times that they need to even get in for their basic care. And so as a veteran myself, I've realized that we need to help each other. We need to reach out. So I actually have started a program in my practice. We call it the VIP program, the Veterans Incentive Program. So if you're a vet and you have a family, basically we say for $50 a month you can come in and you can be seen whenever you want, as much as you want, labs, fees, everything is included. And for your family, we even reduce it more so that you and your wife and your kids up to age 18 can be seen within 24 hours in our clinic for anything that needs to be done. And we've actually started to reach out to the veterans groups. We're going to try to meet with the American Legion as well as VFW and put the word out there because, waiting 3 and 4 months to get into the VA system is just not acceptable. We want to be able to help a lot of these guys out. And really, when you tell folks that have come in to see you that you've served as well, it really does make a big difference to these guys. Some of these guys have things going on that the average person wouldn't have a clue what they go through and what they've been through. And so, I make comments sometimes, oh, yeah, I was over there, and I remember that, and it really resonates well with guys in uniform. In Indiana, we have over 500,000 veterans, 500,000 people that have served. And, there's a reason why the Hoosier State is one of the biggest volunteer states in the country. More people have volunteered for military service than just about any other country in the United States. And the reason for that is, we have people that consider it an honor to serve. There are still people, believe it or not, in today's society that believe it is an honor to serve the United States of America. And for those people, we want to be able to provide services for them that say thank you, for what you've done for us and for what you should do. If there's anybody out there that deserves the best care we got, it's those guys and girls.
Yep.
That's who deserves our best.
Yep.
And there's no excuse. So that's why we've reached out to veteran communities with our program.
This is fantastic news for anybody that's a vet, for anybody who's in the military, and honestly, once again, to hear the greatness of not only our state, but for those individuals who are committed to the honor of serving this great nation. We're grateful for all of you and for all of the service that you've all given. You are listening to RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. This is Warp and Woof Radio. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with Dr. Brian Barber. We are back. You're listening to RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. This is Warp and Woof Radio. We come to you every Wednesday from 10 until noon, and every week we have a new guest. We have a different kind of interview. We interact with all kinds of things, but we always do it from a Christian vantage point. And warp and woof is the concept of vertical, horizontal threads that make up fabric. From a Christian vantage point, that comes out of Colossians 1:17. By him, by Jesus, are all things held together. Our discussion today is about alternatives to healthcare and the concept of holistic concerns for the Christian. And I wonder, Dr. Barber, if we could come back to that basic concept where you said to me in the chats that we had prior to this program that you viewed medical care as personalized, holistic, and individualized. So could you explain what that means to the rest of us, personalized, holistic, and individualized?
Okay. So you go into your doctor, and under a typical model that we have now, you're going to get about 15 minutes. If you're a new patient, maybe 20, 30 minutes. So you go in there with your list. If you're smart, you brought a list. And you tell the doctor, my shoulder hurts, I'm having problems sleeping, my feet hurt, I get these headaches, and my stomach every once in a while just gives up on me, and I start to have all these problems. And you go through your list, and the doctor looks at you and goes, okay, we only have time for 2. So with this 2, okay, so your elbow heals, let me check that. Okay, here's some Motrin, take some Motrin. And maybe you need some physical therapy. Let me take a look. Okay, I'll give you some sheets to do. You can do your exercise at home. Okay, your stomach, we'll go ahead and take some Prilosec. You can take the over the counter. You don't need to give it a second. So go ahead and take some Prilosec and some Motrin, and here's some exercise. And we'll see you next time, okay? We'll see you about 3 months. Okay, all right, bye. And so that's your typical visit. Unfortunately, maybe a little bit whitewashed there, but the idea is a lot of times you can't really get to the core issues, and the core issues are highly individualized. But the bottom line is we live in a society that what I call the Burger King society is we have become the products of our own choices. And by what I mean by that is we have, if you look at the data from what's called Healthy People 2010, that's a recommendation from the government, Medicare, Medicaid specifically, that says these are the top 10 problems in the United States of America right now. This is what's costing us the most money. That's what they say, and they put this out there on this sheet in Healthy People 2010, and they said these are the things that cost us more money than anything else, and this is the problems in America. And so you look at your list, okay? You go through the top 5. Physical activity or lack thereof, okay? Obesity, smoking, drug abuse, suicide, homicide, sexually transmitted diseases, lack of access to health care, any kind of gamut that has to do with human behavior. You look at the top 5: lack of physical activity, obesity, smoking, and drug abuse, and of course suicide and homicide. All 5 of those deal with choices. They deal with human behavior. That we smoke too much, we exercise too little, we drink too much, and then we go to the doctor and we say, "Don't tell me how to live. Just give me a pill to fix the problems I've created, and I'll be on my merry way." Well, there are no magic pills. Okay? There are no instant gratification medicines that all of a sudden can make you 10 years younger, 20 pounds thinner, stop smoking, and just go on your merry way. It doesn't work that way. So we have to get to the core heart of the issue. And if we're really being honest with ourselves, a lot of times the core heart of the issue is we do what we want. I mean, I eat what I want. Mm-hmm. I sleep when I want. I allow stress to affect me too much. I overreact, and I burst out in anger at some people, and it can even be to the point to where I'm violent with some people. And so we have choices, and sometimes we need help with those choices, because as we go down this pathway, we create pathological processes because of the way we have chosen to live, eating too much, exercising too little, etc., etc. You can't go on like that forever. Anybody who has reached that 4th and 5th decade now will tell you that it was a lot different when I was in my 20s. And the reason is because as your body slows down, it can't take the same level of abuse or neglect that you have done when you're 20-year-old and you thought you were Superman and you could eat whatever you want and sleep as little as you want, and now it's taking its toll. And so when we individualize our particular practice, the first thing I do when somebody comes in, regardless of what their particular complaint is, the first thing I look at is their vital signs, of course, because there's a saying, vital signs are vital. There's a reason for that. You probably should be breathing, and your blood pressure shouldn't be 200 over 1,000, or whatever, and you probably should have a good pulse, and and then I look at your weight. Why? Because there are so many things that are tied in with your weight and how heavy you are that can be contributing to whatever it is that you're going to complain to me about. And so looking at a person's lifestyle, and lifestyle medicine is another buzzword that you'll see in these alternative models. Looking at a person's lifestyle and the way that they eat, the way that they exercise or don't exercise, the way that they view how they react to stress, which also brings into the fact that, people of faith who actually practice their faith, they usually have less stress levels. Why? Because there's a verse in the Bible that says, be careful or anxious for nothing. But by everything, let prayer and supplication be made known unto God, and the peace of God, which passes all understanding, shall keep your minds and hearts in Christ Jesus. So people of faith tend to have a better outlook if they choose to live out their faith. And so another question when we individualize our care is we ask people, do you have a faith? And we don't try to be derogatory or single people out or try to coerce them into believing what we believe. Do you have a faith, and does that faith important to you? Does that faith matter to you? And how do you use that faith to help you cope? Because guess what? People of faith usually cope better than people who have nothing. And that has been borne out in many studies in hospice as well as intensive care units and etc. Faith helps, and so we address faith in our individualized plan. We address lifestyles in our individualized plan. That's your holistic approach. That's what you should be doing as a physician. But guess what? You don't have time to be holistic in 15 minutes. Especially with a new patient. 15 to 20 minutes is not going to cut it.
No.
You're not going to be able to go through all these issues and get to the heart of things unless you're going to do it in 18 visits or something like that. It depends on the person. Now, I do have people who show up at my office and say, Doc, nothing's wrong with me. I feel great, man. I just wanted to come in and say hi and establish care. And you know what? I say, well, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, your cholesterol's too high, you're too fat. And no, I'm just kidding. I don't always say that. But I try to help people to continue wellness. My job as a primary care physician is to keep you out of the hospital.
There you go.
Now, I realize that might be counterproductive if I work for a hospital system, for instance. However, in primary care, the better wellness the better wellness screening that we can do, and the better prevention that we can aspire to in helping you to maintain that level of wellness, the better off you're going to be. And once again, direct primary care means I work for you. So it's in my best interest to keep you healthy, because guess what? You're the one who's paying me.
Yeah.
Not Anthem, not Humana, not United.
Wow.
And so, in my model, an individualized, holistic, faith-based approach to care is, in my opinion, the most effective care that you can have.
So what you're basically saying to us is that the origin of the majority of problems that people face medically are their own problems.
You got it.
Created. Okay.
Yeah, I mean now, once again, I didn't, did I create rheumatoid arthritis or cancer?
Right.
No, you didn't most of the time. Of smoking, you could argue, but most of the time, the main problems that the government is saying is wrong with us: physical activity, smoking, obesity, etc. Yes, these are created by lifestyle choices.
Okay. So what two basic virtues, or give us some baseline virtues that you teach to your patients that, as far as you're concerned, meet 80% of the problems head on? What are the basic ideas that you give to your patients that are going to help them overcome the general choices that they're making? What are the things that you tell them that are important to baseline universal principles for all life?
Well, I mean, this isn't rocket science. What do you do when you go into your doctor? Doctor's going to tell you exercise and lose weight. I mean, that's what you're going to be told, right? Because most of our, going back to the Healthy People 2010, most of our problems are inactivity, obesity, diet, and smoking, drug abuse, etc. You can go down the line. So I guess what I tell my patients is when you look at the recommendations, the ACSM, American College of Sports Medicine, for instance, recommends that you have 150 minutes a week of cardiovascular exercise, 30 minutes of which ought to be what they call vigorous, quote-unquote exercise. And so 150 minutes, that's 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Now, do most people do that? Unless you're a gym rat, probably not. I'll be honest. I've had a hard time trying to keep that standard, and I have medical issues myself. And part of them are brought on because I have chosen not to exercise, not to lose weight. And so the other thing is, you should keep a food diet if you are overweight, which is we define by body mass index, which I know is just a rough rule of thumb, but if your BMI is over 25, really, in most cases, it's over 30. I mean, if you're showing up in my office and you've got some sort of complaint, the vast majority of people there have a BMI of over 30. Yeah, that's your body mass index. And so that's a measurement of obesity. Over 30 is what the insurance providers and the medical community considers quote-unquote obese. And that's what most of the people are. And so when I see that, I recommend, you need to put a food diary down so that you can actually then bring it in and show me what you're putting in your mouth. I don't care if it's a stick of gum, put it down in a week's worth of time. But you don't understand, Doc, I'll eat 2 meals a day, man. Yeah, well, what about those snacks that you have in between? Or maybe your meal is, 3 Big Macs or something like that. So that might be true, but you got to figure out what it is. And then once you figure out what it is, then you look at your 2,000 calorie, which is your average male dietary intake is supposed to be, about 2,000 calories, and you compare it to that. And so, with that being said, I mean, once again, this isn't a magic formula. You start an active lifestyle, even if it's walking for 15 minutes, you got to start somewhere. So I tell my patients, just get out and walk. Just get out and do something. Do something active. And, especially in the older folks, in the chronologically enriched community, we don't get old, we get chronologically enriched. In the chronologically enriched community, the research shows that if you stay active after retirement age, you're more likely to live longer. People who are not active, guess what? They die sooner. And so, I recommend that you start something. I don't care what it is. It's interesting to me if you look at these charts of what burns calories. Gardening. Gardening burns like 300 to 600 calories. I mean, you can run 2 miles or you can garden. Which one do you want to do? So get out there and garden, man. Plant some potatoes or something.
Dig in the dirt.
So yeah. So, I mean, there are things that you can do that increase your activity level, but do it. Our problem in America is not knowledge, it's execution. It's just like anything else, whether you're talking about on the football field or whether you're talking about, in the doctor's office. It's execution of the plan.
One of the things that I tell my students all the time is that our behavior often is the thing that dictates our disposition. So the thing that's messing us up mentally is that we just have to go and do something about it. And in doing something about it, then it changes our attitudes about how we relate to life or anything else. The other thing I'll say about this is something my mom says all the time. My mom's 83. You heard us talking about her a little bit as we were closing out that first hour. But she says to me all the time that the purpose in life at her age is to keep moving. And I just think I'm smiling listening to you because I can literally hear my mom's head going up and down saying, yep, absolutely. That's exactly what I tell everybody. And she ended her time in nursing as a wellness nurse. So, of course, this is a very important concept that brings us along to this particular point. I wanted to go back to something that we talked about in our personal discussion, and then something we've been kind of hitting on, you and I both, in the first and second hours here, and that is this idea that the goal of your practice is medicine as ministry. So I want you to unpack that idea for us. When you say medicine as ministry, what in the world does that mean?
Well, we just had this discussion in my office the other day. When you start your own business, you always run the risk of failure. Financial wise, are we going to make it? There's a reason why 50% of businesses fail within the first 6 months, and that's because a multitude of factors leads to the fact that they really didn't have the backing that they needed financial wise to be able to make it work for whatever reason. And so we're at that 6 month point, and we're backing up and we're looking at everything that has gone on and things that we can do to increase revenue and et cetera, try to keep the business afloat. And one of the things that one of the consultants that I was talking to said, okay, first of all, let's back up. What's your mission? Why do you do what you do, first of all? Have you got really that down? Because if you don't have a mission statement as a business, as a corporation, there's a book out there called Good to Great, and it was a book by a guy in Colorado. I don't remember his name off the top of my head.
Jim Collins.
Yeah, Collins. So he took all the companies that had become great, meaning that they were at least 3 to 5 times the stock market increase in their value. Over 15 years. Over 15 years, they had increased value 3 to 5 times what the normal stock market rise was. And so he said, what made them great? That's what he wanted to know. What is it? And one of the main things that he emphasized was that they had a plan, and he called it the hedgehog concept. He had a plan, and they, with steadfast concentration and dedication, they executed that plan. They did not waver from that plan. They stuck with the plan. And so what's the plan was what the question was presented to me. Why are you doing what you're doing, and what is your mission, and how are you aligning yourselves with that mission statement? So we had to take a look at what we were doing. And the reason why I started this practice in the first place, going all the way back to my college days, was I was one of those guys that changed his major 6 times. I was a Bible major, actually. And so I got my degree in pastoral studies with a minor in biology. Huh. If you can think of that. And so I wanted to go into medicine for the purpose of getting the opportunity to tell people about Jesus Christ. And so I, for the past 10 years, have been going to Africa as well as South America and several countries in the third world that don't have any health care really at all. And we go there for a week and sometimes almost 2 weeks at a time to open up a clinic and just provide acute problems, antibiotics and Motrin and worm pills and such, to be able to help with acute things and to tell them about Jesus Christ, which is the most important thing that we're there for. And so that was really my driving force to open up a Christian practice in downtown Indianapolis, was I get to tell people about Jesus Christ. Now, I don't really do it in a way that tries to coerce them or so-called wear it on your sleeve or drive it down their throat. We just come in and we tell them, hey, we're here to treat the whole person, physically, spiritually, lifestyle-wise, whatever it is that's wrong with you. We look at you as an individual, not as that guy with a gallbladder problem. And so when you view yourself that way, when you view what we're trying to do in terms of who we want to minister to and how we want to do it, then it really comes aligned in with what our ultimate goal is, which is to advance the kingdom. We're a Christian practice. We don't apologize for that. We put a Bible reference, Matthew 9:35, right on the front of our building. And so, and we have had a few comments. We had one person come in and say, isn't that illegal to do that and stuff like that? I said, well, as long as we own the practice and we're not really taking any money from the government, I don't see any problem with it. But, there might come a time, and it's getting closer, where the government's going to come in and make us take that stuff down. But at this particular point, as our own private individual business, we've actually put Bible verses and played Christian music in our waiting room and such, not to be offensive to anyone, just to say, well, this is who we are. And we don't care what you believe. We're going to see anyway. It doesn't matter what you believe. But what we believe is that a person is created in the image of God and has ultimate worth.
There you go.
Because Jesus Christ died for them on the cross.
Mm-hmm.
Their life has ultimate value. And we need to align our mission with that value. We need to keep in mind that people aren't coming to us just with physical ailments. It's just not the guy with arthritis in room 2. He's a soul. And he's someone who Jesus died for. And we have to align our mission from a ministry mindset, to be able to look at that person and minister to them in such that not only do we try to help them with whatever particular medical problem they have, but we show them the love of Jesus Christ, and we help them to either disciple them or get them to a place where they see they need God.
In a product-oriented society like we live in today, where everybody is trying to move it down the line faster, get things done cheaper, we really are treating people in the same way in terms of healthcare. So when we talk about the production-oriented nature of the healthcare movement that we see around us in the culture, how would you say what would you say your response would be to that? How do you go against the cultural mindset that we have to do this faster, cheaper, and quit looking at people like the guy with the gallbladder in room 2?
Well, as to efficiency, once again, under the current model that we have in our healthcare society, with insurance-driven, volume-driven medical practice, really, very few people today would argue that this is not a sustainable model. This is an inefficient model. What we're doing now doesn't work. I mean, we have, and I know this has been published ad nauseum by several different people, but really we spend more money than any nation, any developed nation in the world, and we have probably worse outcomes than the vast majority of them in what we do in terms of when they say outcomes, they're talking about life expectancy and infant mortality, how many babies die every year, and things like that. So that's how they determine that our outcomes really don't justify our spending. So we have an inefficient model to begin with. So the question is, how do we change to a more efficient model? Well, my argument is one way that we change to a more efficient model is that we go back to the grassroots of our healthcare, and that is a doctor and a patient, and nobody gets in the middle.
Oh, my.
Nobody gets it. We negotiate a price. You pay me to take care of you, and then I do whatever is necessary to make sure that your problems are addressed to the best of my ability, regardless of how much time that takes, and regardless of whether I have put the right code in or not in order to satisfy the particular bureaucratic regulations that dictate my practice.
Could we say it this way, that in our naturalistic, materialistic culture in which we live, that healthcare is very contractual, but from a Christian vantage point, it's very covenantal? Could we say that?
I think I don't know if you could say that the relationship between a doctor and a patient is a covenant just because they happen to be Christians. I don't know if I would go that route. There's no doubt that our current society, medical care, is contractual. We have networks, and we have in-network, out-of-network. We have medicine that is this much at this particular pharmacy and this much at that pharmacy, and a lot of it depends on the contracts and the way they've been written. And so we have definitely a contractual system now. A covenant system, I guess you could argue that from a Christian standpoint, the doctor-patient relationship particularly is like a promise, an agreement between two people that I'm going to do my best for you. Although secular physicians would argue that's the same thing. I'm contracting with the patient to take care of them. That's what we do when I agree to be their physician. It's called a therapeutic relationship. But a therapeutic relationship isn't always covenantal. I think what you're trying to get to, the bottom line is there are secular physicians have a different worldview than Christian physicians do, and many times that worldview can be, in terms of healthcare, can be tainted by materialism and capitalistic thinking.
Yeah.
You know, for instance, how many heart caths do we do a year? Well, I don't remember the exact number, but I can tell you it's a lot. Do we really need to do that many heart caths? Probably not. Do we do a lot of heart caths because we're practicing defensive medicine? Absolutely. I knew one guy. He was a patient of mine. He had 23 heart catheterizations. 23.
Wow.
It's like they could mark every inch of his coronary artery with a serial number. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And so it's pretty ridiculous sometimes. You'll get these guys that are financially motivated. It's sorry to say, but it's true. Doctors are financially motivated too. Hey, I like to make money. You know, I think other people like to make money as well. I'm not the only profession that does so. And so there are some times when you might get a test that you might not necessarily need because, the hospital makes more money that way.
There you go.
You know, it's sorry to say, but I think in some cases that's probably true.
So we've got maybe 2 minutes left here for our broadcast today. And if you could give us an overview not only of where your clinic is, maybe again the direct health care that you provide for folks. Just give us an overview. Tell us some things that you want to leave with our listening audience here today.
I guess what I would probably say to the person listening on the other end would be, particularly here in America, we spend lots and lots of money on healthcare, and nobody needs to tell you that it's expensive. You can look at your premiums and what you're paying now. And I would challenge you, if you are a person that has some health conditions, now there's a lot of you that are probably pretty healthy and only go see the doctor maybe a couple times a year, if that, and you got to drag you in there to do it. I understand that. But those of you that might be having some chronic medical conditions, be high blood pressure, diabetes, look what you're paying. Look what you're getting for your underlining dollar, because you have to understand your premiums, and I know a lot of you know this, but your premiums do not go to fund your health care. They go to a company like Anthem, United, or Humana, and they get invested by stockholders. United, Humana, and Anthem are publicly traded companies. They are for profit. They don't care about whether you're going to get your colonoscopy on time or not. They don't care about whether your blood pressure medicine is helping you or not. They care about making money for their stockholders. And so that is where your premiums are going. Would you rather those premiums go to a stockholder, or would you rather some of that money go directly to a physician who's going to take care of you? Who is a better stakeholder? Who better has your interests in mind? Now, I know that our profession hasn't, especially of light, hasn't been of the most stellar, as far as integrity. There are some physicians, like I said, who probably have more financial motivation than they should. However, from a pure stakeholder standpoint, who do you think is going to care more about your health? So just take a look at what you're paying. And I would challenge you to look at the direct primary care model and see if that's something that wouldn't fit your budget. And even if you have a health sharing ministry, take a look at that too, and you would be surprised at how much money you can save and still get better care.
And one more time, tell us where your practice is and the name of it, please.
My practice is Amazing Grace Family Medicine. It's located on US 31 South in South Indianapolis, 6349 Southeast Street. That's 31 South. And we are open Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30, and be happy to see you.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Barber, for your good words here today. Grateful for your honesty and directness about questions, not only about the issues of health, but also about the issues of where does that money go for health care. You're listening to RadioNext.tv on the Cool Groove site. We are Warp and Woof Radio. You hear us every Wednesday from 10 until noon. Next week, we are going to have a radio personality in the house, a young man, Adrian, who's going to come and talk to us about not only the history of his profession in radio, but history in general, and why history is such an important discussion to have. And once again, thanks for listening this week. HB and I will be back again next Wednesday at 10 o'clock. We'll see you then.